I thought the legend was just something the docks in Manaus told to sell one more seat in a wooden boat, the way stories grow teeth when money needs a bite. They called her many names in the markets, but the one that stuck to my ribs was simple. The old one. Not a monster, not a miracle. Just old, like a rule. Raimundo didn't sell me the legend. He sold me gas and silence. We left before dawn, the river black and polite, and by the time the sky had the color of a dull blade, we were already deep in a side channel where the world narrows to water, leaf, and breath. Heat came down like a curtain. The forest changed keys. Dragonflies wrote quick blue signatures over the slick. Raimundo cut the engine without being asked. "Agora, quieto," he murmured, and it didn't need translation. We drifted under a latched ceiling of vines, the canoe a loose idea between roots. I smelled it before I saw it, a warm leather note braided with river mud, not rot, not fish, but something with its own gravity. Water ahead puckered, as if the river had inhaled too hard and forgot to exhale. Then the surface rose in a stubborn, careful dome and settled into pattern, green-brown scales with oval rosettes stacked like closed eyes. Movies had taught me to expect a strike. The Amazon taught me to expect math. A thick body unrolled from the hyacinths, as if someone were pulling a rope through a low door. Curve, correction, curve, correction, each movement small enough to be a thought. I counted without wanting to, 8 feet, 10, 12, until numbers felt like rudeness, and I let the measuring go. The head came last, shovel-broad and unspectacular, which is how you know it's real. The eyes did not glitter, they read. The tongue touched the air with a soft double-click 1-2, and the sound wrote itself behind my teeth, where fear and recognition share a wall. Raimundo tapped the gunwale once, a priest's blessing dressed as a warning. On the far bank, a capybara lifted out of the water with the sleepy confidence of a thing that has never put its name under myth. The snake didn't lunge. It corrected again, a miser's motion. The capybara turned its idiot innocent face toward us, and in that half-second the river closed a door I hadn't seen. Not a splash, not a show, just a grunt that failed to become a story, and coils that looked like refusal, like the denial of breath. I've seen wolves run and crocs explode. This was a yes, whispered into a pillow. The jaw didn't unhinge. Biology wouldn't allow me that lie later. It accommodated. Teeth like tiny black commas took punctuation where punctuation was needed, and the throat became a slow tunnel with its own gravity. Time lost its edges. A kingfisher put a nail of blue into the air, and the whole scene remained unedited. The river drew a faint figure 8 around the act, a signature that erased itself as it was written. I waited for triumph or horror, or the permission to scream. None came. Only the old arithmetic of muscle and silence, and a world that doesn't need our surprise to complete a sentence. When the heavy thought inside her had the shape the body would allow, the anaconda slid for shadow. Hyacinths closed like stagehands. Roots received her like a file returning to the right drawer. The tongue wrote 1-2 once more on the damp grammar between us. Not a threat, a fact. We were left with the afterbreath of the river and a single obscene bulge disappearing into green punctuation. Raimundo exhaled for both of us. "No," he said, which in that moment meant everything from "it is done" to "behave." I didn't raise my camera. Not out of nobility, out of a feeling that glass would make the scene smaller than it had been. We backed away by hand, palms in the brown silk, letting current replace intention. The forest did not applaud. A troop of squirrel monkeys scolded us for existing. Somewhere behind us a storm stacked itself into a bright top and a bruised bottom. My heart, unhelpful, kept the new metronome. The old one had not performed. She had practiced. And I finally understood why every story I'd heard felt both exaggerated and insufficient. Because what people try to sell you is size, when the truth worth keeping is precision. Back at the stilt house that night, rain stitched the roof while a gecko argued with a moth above the lantern. I lay in a hammock that smelled of smoke and river and counted without meaning to. 1-2. Not a superstition an instrument. Tomorrow, Raimundo said, we'd visit the flooded forest where trees stand ankle-deep in tea and the water writes erasures as quickly as it writes lines. Seu Rio deixar, he added, if the river allows. The biggest thing I'd seen all day wasn't the snake. It was that sentence. Morning began with a bruise-colored sky and a river that had climbed a quiet inch up the stilts, as if it had practiced overnight. Raimundo steered us into an igapo, where the trees waded ankle-deep in black tea, and the light arrived already edited by leaves. He taught me to read the margins like a local alphabet. Hyacinth rafts tidied after a passing body, root walls held together by shadow, sand tongues with faint commas where something heavy turned back before dawn. The river, he said, never lies. We just mispronounce it. We grounded the canoe where buttress roots curled like sleeping ribs. The forest there speaks in soft percussion drips counting themselves, a frog with a one-note sermon, an insect saw working the heat into planks. Draped over a low branch, a cast skin hung like a cathedral window made of memory oval impressions, in a lattice the color of old paper. I reached, then stopped myself. Out here, touching is a verb with consequences. The skin's perfection undid me more than its length. It was the exact absence of a body that had already moved on, a sentence the snake had finished, and left marked for anyone fluent enough to read. Raimundo showed me patience that didn't advertise itself. He would dip the paddle not to push but to listen, pulling depth from sound. Edges, he said, tapping the waterline where light and dark shared a seam. It's all edges. By midday, the heat had hammered the air flat and bright, and we ate cool rice and salted fish, while the river tried on the smell of lime. Somewhere Atinamu poured its sadness into the afternoon like a small dignified leak. I asked how many times he had seen a giant. He shrugged. Enough to know it's not about size, it's about how she uses water. The channel narrowed until the jungle could have shaken hands across it. That's where the river edited itself. The hyacinths ahead parted along a clean seam, not windwork, not luck. A low dome rose and failed to become a splash. The head was shovel-broad and almost plain, which is how the wild hides its perfection. The tongue wrote 1-2 into the damp grammar between us. So I felt the count land behind my teeth the way a word in another language lands, when you finally understand it as meaning, not as sound. The body kept arriving, a clause unrolling, curve, adjust, curve, until numbers seemed impolite again. She didn't study us. She chose a corridor that didn't exist until she believed it into being, a darker sentence braided into roots and shade. A thin run of bubbles ticked up near the bank, too regular for swamp gas, too calm for panic. Not a strike then, a negotiation. The snake paused, tasted the punctuation, and reversed with the same precision you see in a boat handled by someone who trusts current more than muscle. She drifted cross-channel, laid down a faint figure 8 on the water, and let it erase itself before my camera would have focused. Permission denied, kindly. Rain came in small silver coins, loud on leaf, whisper on river. The smell that followed was new and old, at once green, cut with metal. We sheltered under a roof of vines, the canoe a comma in a long sentence. I found myself practicing the count without deciding to. 1-2. It stopped being superstition and started being a tool. How long between appetite and act. How patient you have to be to see the thing you claim to want. Raimundo smiled into the rain without looking at me. You're starting to hear, he said, which felt both like praise and like an assignment. On the way back, a tourist boat hunched under a tarp, a man leaning out with a phone as if trying to lasso wonder into a frame. I pitied him and recognized him. Yesterday, he was me. The river forgave us both by continuing. In the village that evening, light pooled in yellow squares and a radio argued soccer, like it mattered as much as weather. I swung in the hammock, the fabric holding me the way the channel holds a hyacinth raft, and the day rearranged itself into fewer, truer measures. The old one is not an event. She is the proof of a system that rarely needs to raise its voice. Before sleep took me, the roof learned a new rhythm from the rain, and the geckos added footnotes to the margins. I counted once more, not to summon anything, but to keep what had arrived. 1-2. The largest snake I had ever seen wasn't just long, she was correct. And the only way to meet correctness without scaring it off is to become quieter than your questions. Tomorrow, Raimundo said, we would try a shoot he trusts only when the river is in a good mood. If she says no, we go home. I believed him. Out here, refusal is also a kind of mercy. By day 3, I'd stopped looking for centers. Everything worth knowing happened at the seam where blackwater kissed a root wall, where hyacinths stitched themselves shut after something heavy passed, where light thinned to green glass under a roof of leaves. Raimundo said we'd walk a strip of terra firme, to let the river become a voice instead of a view. On dry ground, the forest speaks in a different tense-leaf litter, popping like quiet grease. Ants hauling their republic along highways of shine, buttress roots ribbing the earth like a sleeping whale. We found a shed skin snagged in a small tangle, a long ghost of diamond panes parted neatly like a zipper down one side. Up close, it looked like a stained glass negative, each oval a memory, each crease a kept promise. I didn't touch it. Not out of superstition, but because out here touching edits a sentence you didn't write. The lesson landed with embarrassing clarity. The most intimate proof a life leaves behind is often the exact shape it no longer needs. The old ones finish a paragraph and file it in the branches for anyone fluent enough to read. At a blind oxbow shaded like a closed eyelid, we sat with our backs against roots and let the air work us. Frogs kept time like monks. A tinamou poured its soft sorrow into the understory, and the sound went farther than sight ever does. In the shallows, a string of bubbles curved, paused, corrected, straightened in tension, rehearsing its lines. A young anaconda surfaced to the width of a palm and wrote 1-2 into the heat, not hunting, just solving the lacework of submerged sticks with a geometry that made my skeleton feel clumsy. She slid under duckweed without ceremony and left the faintest figure 8 that erased itself as it declared itself. Back home, they'll ask me for numbers. How long, how close, how heavy? I will fail them kindly. The measurements that matter here are intervals and temperatures, the distance from shadow to sun, the beat between 1 and 2, and the decision to move. The forest edits itself in those gaps. A breeze will take a line of insect noise out of a paragraph, a cloud will lower the ceiling, and every bird will rewrite its key. In that margin, the old intelligence is easiest to hear. We returned to the canoe by a path I could not have found again with a compass and an apology. The channel there narrowed to confession width, banks near enough to exchange rumors. Hyacinths floated like punctuation waiting for a clause. That's where the river changed its breath, not louder, just aligned. The mats ahead parted along a seam too clean for wind. A slow dome lifted, failed to become a splash, and settled into rosettes the color of oiled bronze. The head rose last, plain as truth, and the tongue tapped the air 1-2, printing the count on the back of my teeth like a word I finally understood. She didn't consider us. She chose a corridor we could not see because it wasn't a place. It was a density, a preference written in shadow and drift. A capybara trail stitched out of the bank and died at the waterline like a sentence that had decided against itself. Near the roots, a tiny sound like a dropped pin gave the scene its verb. The snake made the smallest possible correction and vanished under the root vault with a grace that felt like a reprimand. This is how you move when you are honest about water and weight. We waited through it, which is to say we honored the part of the story we weren't invited to witness. Rain shouldered in from the east, first as rumor, then as silver coin, loud on leaf, whisper on river. The root wall trembled once the way a house does when someone leaves a room. She didn't reappear. The only residue was the rhythm still ticking behind my teeth and the fact that neither of us spoke until the rain rewrote the surface into static. Lightning stitched white sutures into a charcoal sky on the paddleback. We navigated by things with manners, dead snags that don't lie. A bent elbow meander you can trust at dusk, a crown of palms combed flat by wind. The village lit itself in small squares, kerosene lanterns, radios arguing soccer, children sparking under stilts. I understood finally why the market legends felt both gaudy and stingy. They peddle size because size sells. What the river gives, if you arrive correctly, is precision and permission. In the stilt house, with the roof learning rain like a new instrument and a gecko punctuating the margins, I lay in the hammock and practiced the only arithmetic that still made sense. 1-2. The count had stopped being a charm. It was now a unit, the space between appetite and act. The breath you leave unclaimed so the world can keep its own. Raimundo said we'd try a narrow shoot at dawn if the river is in a good mood. Out here, moods have hydraulics. I slept with that sentence in my mouth like a smooth stone, and the old one moved under hyacinths somewhere, not performing, just continuing. Dawn arrived with the color of pewter, and a river that had quietly climbed the stilts another thumb's width, as if the night practiced while we slept. Raimundo said we would try the shoot, a narrow run he only trusts when the water has its manners. If she says no, we go home, he reminded me, meaning the river, not the snake. I realized how clumsy my grammar had been. I'd been asking for an animal when I should have been asking for alignment. We slid into the green corridor without a motor, the canoe moving on courtesy, not ambition. The channel was the width of a conversation held in confidence. Lianas wrote cursive overhead. Light fell in green coins. We passed a caiman installed like punctuation among the roots, its eye taking notes. Twice, Raimundo stalled us with a fingertip against the bank, once for a net of bubbles rising regular as a metronome, once for a root wall with silence arranged too carefully to be chance. Out here, stillness is also a verb. I felt my heart pick up the new arithmetic. 1, 2, 1, 2, not as threat, not as spell, as unit interval enough to check your own weight against the waters. Then the forest edited itself. The hyacinths ahead separated along a seam as straight as a ruler. The surface bulged and resisted becoming splash. Pattern resolved to rosettes, oiled bronze in low light, and the head rose last, plain as weather. The tongue touched the air 1, 2, and wrote the count behind my teeth. She did not so much choose us as read past us. The body kept arriving in clauses. Curve, adjustment, curve, with the stingy grace of an instrument tuned for truth. Numbers failed me again. Precision did not. I watched how little it takes to be correct, watched how obviously I am not. She passed within a kindness of distance, not performing, not hiding, just traveling through density she understood, and I did not. A capybara trail stitched down the bank and ended in a regret. Near the root vault, something made a sound like a dropped pin. The anaconda corrected by a width of a thought and sank, not disappearing but continuing, which is different. Hyacinths closed behind her like stagehands, and the river felt briefly flatter, as if a heavy idea had been set down carefully where it belonged. We floated in the stripped silence that followed. It wasn't disappointment, it was oxygen. Proof would have been a photograph, an insult wrapped in pixels. Permission was this, being allowed to be nearby while the old intelligence proceeded. Rain shouldered in from the east, first rumor, then silver coins loud on leaf, whisper on water, the way a house does when a room empties. She didn't return. She didn't need to. The lesson had already taken my pulse and reset it. On the way out, lightning stitched white seams across a charcoal sky, and the river shouldered us back toward human noise radios arguing soccer, frying oil telling the truth about evening, children sparking under stilts. The village did not lean toward my revelation. It had errands. I found that merciful. Legends should tuck under the day, not warp it. I packed small, a damp notebook, a lime's ghost on my fingertips, the hammock's curve still printed in my back. I tried to frame a question that wouldn't embarrass me. How do I see her again? I asked anyway. Raimundo smiled the way doors smile when they're properly hung. You don't see, he said. You arrive correctly and sometimes she allows. On the big river, commerce took back the grammar. Barges pushed brown sentences downstream. The sky widened. My mouth kept the count 1, 2, not as souvenir but as tool, the gap between impulse and action, the patience you owe a place if you're going to borrow its stories without breaking them. At the port, we shook hands with the brevity men use when words would bruise the thing itself. He nodded at the water, meaning, take the lesson, not the tale. The lesson is quieter. It survives dry seasons. In the window seat of a plane pretending to frame what can't be framed, I finally understood why they call her the Old One in the plural. She's several. Patience, edge, temperature, shadow, weight added, until the answer moves under hyacinths and writes 2 soft clicks on the air. 1, 2. If anyone asks for proof, I'll give them what the river left me. The rhythm behind my teeth, the figure 8 awake writes and erases, the shape of a silence that taught me to leave it alone. The Amazon doesn't end its sentences with periods. It closes them with water.